Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. This show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness initiative. This episode is sponsored by Police Mortgage. Police Mortgage is a full-service mortgage company dedicated to serving police officers and first responders. Founded in 2008, Police Mortgage offers a variety of mortgage products tailored to meet the needs of those who serve and protect. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. Welcome to part 2 of Stay Sharp Through Proper Training.
There's a thing called the uncanny valley. This was established by Dr. Mori in 1972, where as CGI and robots get more human-like, we initially have an attraction to it. We kind of like it. It's cool. It's fun. Then we have an aversion to it. We actually have a psychological aversion where it creeps us out and causes us problems where we want to avoid it. And there's been like 900 and some odd research papers on the uncanny valley last I checked. But the belief system is that it's protection, right? You and I are part of a tribe. If we, we've got as an example, that dead body has got that uncanny valley feeling. It's like they're there, but they're not there, and people avoid it. Well, there's an evolutionary perspective because if that's disease, I don't want to get it to the rest of the tribe. There's a threat potentially there. So the challenge that you run into is if you're using CGI that has that, and the stuff that I use, the volumetric doesn't have that. But if you're using CGI, how do you know your use of force program is literally based on sound principles as opposed to people are responding to the creepiness of the CGI character?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some major issues that you could end up having to battle in court, and to test that, to actually parse that out on whether it's behavior activities of the representative character versus its uncanny valley, that's thousands of dollars of research to be able to parse that out and figure it out. And very few people and organizations have time. So we just bypass it. We use volumetric capture. I literally will throw a headset on my character. I get to walk around and see how much the back of my head shines. But to see the micro expressions in my face, to see something as simple as, a twitch in the corner of my mouth when I speak, those all represent inside volumetric capture. You can't do it with CGI. It doesn't work. Yeah. So inside that CG or in that volumetric environment, all of the things that we were talking about earlier, as far as being able to show that expression of, somebody being misleading or trying to, lie to you, to say it more bluntly, or people that are nervous, or if they're, something as simple as if I'm trying to connect with somebody emotionally, right? Think of it from the de-escalation perspective. If I'm trying to connect with somebody emotionally, how do I do that with a computer image that's a cartoon? It's not realistic. How do I connect with it? How do I know what the emotion is? How do I see if there's a change when it can't represent it? But I can represent it with a volumetric. I've got characters that are just absolutely phenomenal. I built one. This actor was amazing. Absolutely love this kid. He's a non-suicidal self-injury, so he's a cutter. He's got some suicidal ideation. He's thinking about committing suicide because he's hurting, and what he does is he uses pain on the outside to suppress the pain that's on the inside. So he's doing the typical, what we used to call as a hesitation cut. When I first started, we come to find out it's not a hesitation cut. It's literally they're using it to keep from killing themselves. They want to feel something. And it's a way to distract from the suicidal ideation. This kid's amazing. You hear the emotion in his voice. You see the facial expressions. You see him try to hide the piece of tile that he was cutting himself with. I mean, you can't do that stuff with CGI. And this kid is just, you're there, man. You're on for the ride. And that's the beautiful thing about it is now I can show those things and help people start to develop those schema. If I have an instructor who's running the character, that instructor can help explain that, so then the officer, it makes more sense to them in the construct or the context of that environment with that other role played character, right? So those are all things that we're doing to make the impact. Everything from the de-escalation component and the emotional component to the physical constraints. We There's a OSU, Ohio State University. I got to give a shout out to those guys, Dr. Volick's lab and Alex. They just did a big project because they do a lot of funding with the DOJ, and they went through this huge validation process with our simulator, where they were able to validate our simulator on 21 different metrics with consistency and all kinds of stuff, because they've got to be able to ensure that the validation's there when it comes to the work they're doing with the DOJ and what they're doing with like, trying to remember how much I can talk about their work when they're dealing with performance, and the performance that they're
Yeah.
using to measure is a marksmanship task with the rifle, which is a big deal if you're a soldier, right?
Hmm.
Knowing that we've got that level of detail, that level of consistency, and that third party outside groups are the ones that are saying, hey, yeah, you guys are awesome, and we believe so much in your product that we're doing research on your product, or
Hmm.
I'm sorry, we're using your product to help us conduct research for other groups. It's awesome for
Yeah.
me. And I know that what we're doing is fantastic for the people that we get to work with. So everything from that to the other end of things are all stuff that we're doing. We integrate less lethal and taser and
Hmm.
OC spray, and so that we can get as much as we can on the officer's belt, so that you start I start giving you more and more choices. The whole concept of Hick's law, right? Hick's law states, as I give you more choices, it takes you longer time to actually go through those choices and make the
Hmm.
decision. Well, I need that as part of the task, part of that environment, part of the constraint. You've got to make the decision. Back to my aspect of the analogy of the tennis player. I'm going to feed you a forehand, and then I'm going to feed you a backhand and an overhead. You don't know what's coming,
Hmm.
because as a cop, you don't know what's coming, and you need to
Yeah.
get used to being able to know where to pay attention, know how to interpret the information, be able to formulate the decision, then be able to carry it out. So that's the short version of a ton of work that we've been doing
Yeah.
to make sure that the simulators provide unbelievable quality and value for the men and women that are out there.
Well, let's yeah. One of the things I remember reading on the virtual website, at least I'm pretty sure it was on the virtual website. I'm privileged to have a number of guests, and sometimes they, I'm an old guy. I'm in my 50s, so sometimes everything runs together. But I'm pretty sure it was on the virtual website, and it talked about better to fail in simulation than to fail out on the street. And yeah, I said I wasn't gonna throw you a curveball. This might be a little bit of a curveball. It just came into my head, and we could always edit this out if it's like too far out there. But truth be told, as I many times I make clear on public safety talk radio, I was never a first responder. I was never in law enforcement. I've had the privilege of working with law enforcement for over 20 years, and I'm proud of it. And most of the time almost always I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the police officer. I don't remember all of the details, so I apologize ahead of time, both to you and the audience, if I get any of these things wrong. But I know a number of years ago, I think it was before COVID, there was an incident in Los Angeles where there was a chase, where they were chasing a suspect on foot. The suspect was shooting back at the police officers and was about to run into a Trader Joe's. And the officer decided to shoot back at the suspect. And I believe this officer was fairly new on the job. Again, it just came to mind. I don't have the info in front of me. I want to say he was only a couple years on the job. Shot at the suspect. It ended up hitting an innocent manager of that Trader Joe's,
Right.
and she unfortunately lost her life. And obviously the LAPD took a lot of heat for this because an innocent person ended up getting killed. I sit there and, of course, I feel sorry for that family as well as the police officer, because he's got to live with killing an innocent person. And that individual's, I believe he's off the job now. but for the rest of his life, he's got to think about, should I have made a different decision? Yeah. Now, my thought, and you were a police officer, I wasn't. Yeah, my thought at the time was, the thinking may be in seconds, like, do I want him to get into this Trader Joe's and have a possible hostage situation? Yeah,
Right.
that very well may have been the thought, and it's a legitimate thought. So, to kind of finish up my ramble and bring it to the simulation, yeah, do you simulate those types of
Yes.
scenarios, and how does that help somebody to maybe that it was the right decision? I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not a police officer, or maybe there were, like as you alluded to just a little while ago, maybe there were two or three other choices that they could have made that could have brought about a different result. Do you want to speak to
Yeah.
that at all,
Yeah.
or
So
or is that a curveball?
not well. It's a curveball, but I love it. Let's take it. So
Yeah.
right. So we have to look at that in layers. The first layer is everything from a use of force perspective is foundationally based on what's called Graham versus Connor. Graham Connor was a Supreme Court decision that literally is the foundation of all uses of force. Right. It's very clear that a case or a use of force has to be evaluated based on a few different factors. They call them the Graham factors, but the short version is to understand that we have to balance an individual's rights with the governmental interest. So the intrusion that I will do upon you as a law enforcement officer, how intrusive, how damaging, how extreme, how much is that, and I weigh it with the reason why I'm there, what the governmental interest is. If you are a individual trying to severely harm me or harm someone else, that's a high governmental interest, and the balance is very simple. I'm absolutely able to use a high intrusive amount of force shooting you to stop you from doing that, right? So then you layer that on top of another case called Graham versus Connor. Graham Connor talks about the fleeing felon. Specifically, I have an individual who has committed a felony, and I've got to look at, okay, if I don't apprehend this individual immediately, is there a risk that this person will then go and cause serious physical injury or death to somebody else? Some felonies, as established in the original Tennessee Garner case, don't justify shooting somebody, right? Arizona, as an example, if you steal beer from a convenience store, your third go round is technically a felony. It's beer, right? I'm not shooting you for a case of Bud Light,
What
right?
if it's your beer and not the convenient? Never mind. That's a bad
Well,
joke.
they never put Guinness by the front door.
Yeah.
It's always in the back. It's so that's my beer.
Are you looking for a podcast to answer some financial questions? Well, then check out the Mortgage Beat podcast, brought to you by Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. Mortgage Beat gives insight into the home loan process specifically for police officers, firefighters, and other public safety professionals. The podcast is hosted by Police Mortgage CEO John Aritos, who has decades of experience in the mortgage industry. Check out Mortgage Beat on Spotify today.
You've got multiple layers on that. So first and foremost, I've got to deal with the nature of the governmental interest and the balance that I have to play in that, right? With and the intrusion on the individual, and then the secondary consideration of the fleeing felon, and then the tertiary is whatever act I carry out, there's a risk to the community at large, and I've got to play that out. If I didn't do anything, it could have gone hostage.
Mhm.
But do I have reason to believe that, or is the guy getting run through the store? It could have gone active shooter. Well, do I have
Mhm.
can I articulate that I have a reason to believe that? Well, if this guy was just an active shooter somewhere else, and I know that, and he's now running and he's going into this store, I have no reason to believe he wouldn't carry out the violence in there. So then I do have to look at, okay, now I have to take action, and you may lose big on that, unfortunately. But if you don't do anything, now what's the risk?
Mhm.
So you're really talking about a multiple layer question
Yeah.
in that, and you have to look at, Graham Connor talks about it, what are the totality of the circumstances? I have to understand first and foremost, what is the totality of the circumstances? And to say that he was right or wrong in his decision to use force is one thing, but maybe it was 100% right, but he needed to
Yeah.
either engage sooner or his
Hmm.
stop the environment. Remember, I talked about that whole constraint-led approach thing where the environment was more permissive. In other words, I didn't have a window that was going to go into, maybe I should have done something sooner.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to always talk about, time is on our side. Yeah, that's not true. Um, time is I had an article I wrote the other day, and I talked to a few people about it, that time is actually a competitive resource.
Mm.
And sometimes it works for us and sometimes it works against us. But to say that time is always on your side is a very comforting lie that people will like to tell themselves. And people on like a hostage barricade type situation, they might
Hmm.
like to tell themselves, but it's not always true. Time sometimes works for you, sometimes it works against you, and based on a lot of factors.
Sure. You look at
So in
Uvalde, Texas, I mean,
Yeah,
time wasn't on their side. Yeah,
right.
and yeah, it's one of those things where, I'm certainly, yeah, I want to emphasize this. I'm not saying that any officer did something wrong or right, but point out, especially that this is where simulation can really be valuable in that, these are complex situations. It's not a, hey, the guy stole beer and I'm just going to stop him. Yeah, this is a complex situation, and one that you couldn't possibly, as you said, train for by, okay, step up, shoot 2 rounds, and then move to the side. That doesn't help you with the Trader Joe's situation. That doesn't help you with the Uvalde situation. But
But I can do it in
simulation,
a
fine.
simulator.
Yeah, exactly.
I can have an environment, and we've got some stuff. We just built an entire as part of our, we call it a active threat, active killer, ATAK attack, where and the scenario is called mass chaos. It is this huge multi-incident event at a church, but you have innocents that are around, right? And you have to
Mhm.
be able to make the decision. Maybe I need to shoot sooner. Maybe I need to wait a fraction of a second, and maybe I got rounds coming at me, but I can't risk hitting, mom and 3 kids or whatever else happens to be. Or I pick my angles. Right? Can I take a knee and create a shot angle where I'm not running the risk of the people in the background? But we do know that there are some circumstances where law enforcement's going to lose little or lose big. And the one
Mhm.
that I've always talked about, and it was a philosophical discussion, is let's say that I have a concert, right? And I at this concert I have hundreds of people in line trying to get into the venue.
Mhm.
I have an individual that I know is on a terrorist watch list. He's decided that he's going to make a statement. He's wearing a bomb vest and he's walking towards the crowd. The crowd is my backstop.
Mhm.
If I do nothing, he gets to the crowd, he detonates that vest, that bomb, and he's going to hurt tons and tons of people. If I engage with my handgun and miss, I run the risk of hitting an innocent.
Mhm.
Sometimes you run the risk of losing big or losing little, but you're still potentially going to lose. And I learned that going to the Alert Training Center and running through their active shooter program. That was a statement that Dave Foss stated. I will never forget it. Sometimes we lose big, sometimes we lose little, but either way, you're going to lose. And those are some of the choices that we end up having to
Yeah.
make. And I'm not making excuses. I don't have the all of the details on your event with Trader Joe's, so it's hard for me
Sure.
to say. But I can come up with a ton of different permutations, ton of different events where yeah, that's horrible. But if I don't do anything,
Yeah.
more people. It's the trolley car, question sometimes too. It's like, can I deal with that? Can I deal with killing one, uh, or not doing something and I risk five? And then how does
Yeah.
that play out? So yeah, lots of questions.
I want to get to the de-escalation. You
Mm.
alluded to it. Yeah, it's a big buzzword today. Yeah, we could talk, forever on it, both positive, negative. But as I said before I even press record, anything that is going to save lives, get police officers, home to their families safely, I'm all for it. So, yeah, how does a simulator train for de-escalation techniques?
Yeah, so remember I talked about the branching technology.
Yeah.
I have multiple characters with various dialogue that I can get you to engage in, and then, you know, we'll see how it works out for you. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I can have you in an environment. Let's say that you get stuck in, I used to call it a goofy loop. I got chastised by Dr. Lewinsky one time calling it a goofy loop, which is when you engage in the same repetitive verbal pattern over and over and over again and expect a different outcome, right?
Mhm.
When you're elevated in emotion, drop the gun, 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 right? It's like that kind of thing. But it's the same thing can happen in a dialogue where you're trying to talk to somebody as well. And you say the same thing and expect a different outcome. The beautiful thing is an instructor can pause it and go, hey, you've said that 5 times and you're not seeing a change. Why don't you and I talk about some other options or other things that you can say or other things you can do early on, specifically as people are developing the skills. Now you get people that's more somebody who's more refined and more experienced. Maybe you don't pause the scenario, right? You just let it play out. And you let, nope, I'm not rewarding you for engaging in something that's not going to play out. Now all of a sudden you go down the right path, and I can have the character engage in behavior that is, supportive of where you're trying to take it. The other beautiful thing is inside of simulators, and the one piece that I've seen a lot, I've been through a ton of de-escalation instructor schools, more than I can shake a stick at. And there are very few that are looking at one of the more important questions in de-escalation, which is, are you even talking to somebody that can be de-escalated?
That's a good
Because
question.
what happens a lot is the you called it the best name, the catch-all, right? The catchphrase. The issue becomes, is this an individual that even can de-escalate? Because and there's an article I just wrote about this concept as well, because I don't de-escalate anybody. I create an environment where they may
Right.
de-escalate themselves. But if they can't de-escalate because mentally they don't have the capability, there's chemicals on board, those kind of things. That's where I may spend time, a resource, to allow the chemicals to change in their system or to get additional resources out. If that environment allows me to do it. But if I have somebody that, my agency, we had somebody that literally took a box cutter, put it on their own neck, and were getting ready to cut their own throat. And I'm like, you're not going to de-escalate that, right? If you do, by the time that you get to the end, he's already bled out. So that's not time for de-escalation. There's video of a situation where a subject has stabbed the living tar out of somebody, and the person's on the ground bleeding, and the subject standing over them still with the knife, and this officer's trying to de-escalate. And I'm like, hold on a second. That person on the ground is potentially bleeding to death as you're trying to engage in your Doc Thompson's verbal judo. That might not be the appropriate time either, because they're preventing you from getting help to that person that's underneath. And then there's the other aspects. Some people just can't be de-escalated, and you got to figure those things out. Force Science does a great job. They have what's called a TEB, a TEB profile, what they use to actually look at, somebody who's engaging in contaminated thinking, or if they're not, and the way to actually objectively evaluate if this is an individual at this moment in time that you can actually de-escalate or not. They're one of the few groups that have done that, and we create scenarios that allow. The beautiful thing is I create scenarios that allow any de-escalation methodology to be utilized. I don't care which system, which method, which instructor, whoever had their name on it, because I create the context and you use the tactics. The context is the environment and the individual's behavior. Whatever you use, the words that you choose, how you choose to say them, whatever, that doesn't matter in a simulated environment. So I don't care if you learned your de-escalation methodology through CIT. I don't care if you learned your methodology through any of the other companies that are out there. It doesn't matter. I can still provide you with a great training opportunity to utilize them, because the branching, I can drive it down the path that it needs to. And sometimes that path is they comply, and sometimes that path is they don't comply. Sometimes they vacillate. Right? You get along and like, hey, I think I'm working. All of a sudden, they have something going on, on board or internally, and then they're back up to a manic state, and
Mhm.
there's an issue. So those are all things I can do inside a simulator, and I can do it for a long period of time. I can do it short. I can video, audio record you doing it, and then I can talk about what you said and how you said it, which are important aspects when it comes to that environment.
Sure. Sure. Well, I'm learning a lot. As a longtime podcaster, my podcast colleagues and I always talk about that. One of the reasons we do this stuff is to learn ourselves. And I literally could speak to you for another hour. There's so much good stuff here. But before I wrap this great conversation up, tell folks out there, especially police departments, other law enforcement agencies that really should be using something like this, how they can get in touch with Vertra, maybe, get a sample, get a demo or something like that so they could train their police officers.
Yeah, you can find us online, virtua.com. We do demos. We have regional sales guys that are all over the place. We do demos even virtually. We've got a new setup for people
Nice.
that can't, just to at least get a taste. You're not getting the full experience, because the beauty on a full simulation event is I hand you a Glock with a laser insert and a CO2
Mhm.
kit, and that I can actually force a malfunction on, right? And as an instructor, I can press the button and create a jam in your weapon that you got to clear, right? So it's kind of hard to do in a virtual environment. I give you a functional taser. I can allow it to work or not work. Same thing with the OC spray. All of those play out when you're actually inside the sim. And probably one of my favorites is we have this thing called a threat fire. So a threat fire is a little bit bigger than an Apple iPhone, and it has a electrical stimulation device that if you miss your threat angle, if you miss the individual taking shots at you, if you miss the dog who's going to bite you or the person that's going to run you over, my instructor can activate it, and the metal plates will electrify the nerve endings through your skin, and you're going to yelp because it hurts. Um, but what that does is it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, is it creates an environment with a context where there's some actual personal risk.
Yeah.
So I create the environment. But those we do all those demos all over the place. Our sales guys do it. If you're anywhere in the Phoenix Metro Chandler area, we can get you down to our main office and get a demo that way. We host regional stuff on a routine basis. Y'all can reach out to me. I'm all over the place when it comes to Vertra. You can find me on LinkedIn. The easy ways that we can get you hooked up with somebody so you can actually get some time inside the simulator. Check out especially some of our newer content. It's absolutely fantastic. We've done some stuff with a group called SARC, Southwest Autism Research Center, specifically dealing with individuals on the spectrum. We
Mhm.
did a complete reenactment on this thing. We call it My Story, but it's the Kyle Dinkeller story. Most of
Mhm.
the officers out there have seen the Dinkeller video, where Kyle was killed, and we actually I reached out to his dad. I had his dad come in, and we broke that entire thing down from a tactical and a technical perspective. His dad had insight. Patrick Schaefer did a amazing movie that you can find on Amazon. It's called Dinkeller. Patrick was kind enough to let us have some of the film that he shot, but we looked at it from a tactical, technical perspective and all those details. And then we also did a reenactment in a scenario so that you can actually apply the tactics and apply everything so that Kyle's loss, Kyle's sacrifice has some meaning for other officers in the
Sure.
future. But yeah, those are the things that we've done recently. I'd love to get people in, because I think they're so impactful.
Yeah. Yeah, if whether it's Vertra or something else, I think you should probably start with Vertra. For the love of God, give our guys and gals out there, the right training. I think I saw on somebody's website, I'm pretty sure it was Vertra's, that there are cosmetologists that are getting more training than our police officers, and they definitely deserve the best training out there. So, Lon, yeah, great interview. great conversation, and great stuff with the simulator, man. I really appreciate what you're doing out there. Appreciate your service as a law enforcement professional, and obviously appreciate you spending some time with us today, man.
Absolutely, man. If there's anything I can do for you, I'll reach out. Anybody listening, lbartel@vertra.com. Easy way to get a hold of me. But yeah, let me help you out any way that I can.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Definitely go ahead and reach out to Lon if you want more information. But appreciate you being with us here for this latest episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another great guest.
Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.